I've always thought that the notion of invoking a god of the gaps was self-refuting, but for some reason I always receive comments like this one. Now, how is it not okay for people of faith to give credit to God when we don't understand something, but all is well for academia to speculate on something it doesn't understand while flippantly rejecting any notion for God, or at least an omnipotent designer whose cause must be greater than its effect? When a believer brings up this sort of thing, the usual response seems to be to remind this person that thousands of years ago, humans didn't understand lightning, so they attributed it to Zeus. People didn't understand tsunamis or floods, so they attributed them to Poseidon. But now that we have natural explanations for these events, we can say that their attempt to invoke the supernatural failed miserably. But this still doesn't address why simply posing God as a possible explanation is considered to be weak. So here's an example that I use a lot. Say I'm trying to figure out the biochemical mechanism for the second step in the Calvin cycle that forms 1,3-bisphosphoglycerate from 3-phosphoglycerate. So using the tools that are currently available, I go out and attempt to figure out which bonds are being broken, which bonds are being formed, what the transition states are, and what order this whole thing occurs in the reaction. But unfortunately, all my tools are useless because the reaction just happens way too quickly. I just can't figure it out. So then I decide to write a paper stating that maybe there is an undetectable, intelligent, omnipotent, and omnipresent being that happens to intervene every time this reaction occurs. Now, any reasonable person reading this paper, even the most ardent theist, would probably tell me that this is a poor hypothesis. If you were critiquing this paper, you'd probably tell me that I need to just wait until there are better tools to study this reaction, and until then I should just admit that I don't know what's happening. And not only does this whole God hypothesis tell us very little about what actually happens and how it actually happens, but it makes the very huge assumption that the supernatural is intervening when there's no evidence that one does intervene anywhere else in biochemistry or even anywhere else in any other scientific field. If I wrote this paper, I would get laughed at, and rightfully so. On the other hand, if I speculate based on evidence that's currently known, then that would be reasonable. For example, if I found a similar reaction where the mechanism was known, and then I attempted to explain my reaction based on that mechanism, that would be a whole lot more reasonable than just assuming that there's a God who intervenes.